Today we sit down with one of the most skillful fly-halves of his generation, Charlie Hodgson.
They spoke a lot about this whole idea of effort error and skill error. Saracens flipped it on its head when I joined them, and they were like, right, we're going to take that off you. We're going to take that pressure off you. That worry of making mistakes, we'll take it away from you. You don't need to be anxious about working hard. That's an easy thing to do, isn't it? Like, resilience, I think, actually is something that you develop through practice by throwing yourself into uncomfortable situations to see how you respond and to see how you then move forward from that. That was a huge turning point for me in terms of how hard it is to build trust with people, but how easy it is to destroy it in an instant. Actually take your strength and turn it into a super strength. But then, of course, I can't take away the fact that winning trophies is like just incredible, isn't it? And actually to walk away from the game in that way was just, yeah, I mean, I couldn't ask for anything else, to be honest.
Everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast. And today we sit down with one of the most skillful fly-halves of his generation, Charlie Hodgson. From record-breaking debuts to rebuilding confidence after setbacks, Charlie shares what it truly takes to perform under pressure, lead with purpose, and keep evolving beyond the game. Whether you're coach, player, or leader in any field, this conversation is packed with lessons on mindset, transition, and the power of consistency. Charlie, brother, how are you doing? Great to have you.
All right, thank you. How are you? Good to be here with you.
No, great. Finally got more than 7 hours of sleep, so I'm quite pumped and energized and getting ready to go to the pod. And Ben will be joining us shortly. Charlie, we normally start this podcast off by a simple question, and kind of connecting to what your former coach said, Mark McCall, that you were one of the greatest players in the Premiership era. So what is the one lesson from the game that you have learned that you can share with young rugby players and aspiring coaches out there?
It was actually something that I picked up when I joined Saracens. They spoke a lot about this whole idea of effort error and skill error. I think certainly through my days at Sale and certainly through my younger days as a player, there's always this inhibition to try things. Sometimes there's a fear of making mistakes. People don't want to kind of go off script a little bit or try something that they might make a mistake, and then for fear of what the repercussions were. Saracens flipped it on its head when I joined them, and they were like, right, okay, we're, in terms of skill error, we're going to take that off you. We're going to take that pressure off you. That worry of making mistakes, we'll take it away from you. And as coaches, that's our responsibility to make you better at that. So it kind of removed that worry that players had to go out there and perform. The effort error was something that we always had control over. It was something that, and just in terms of our work rate, it was always something that we had complete control over, whether we wanted to commit ourselves to training, commit ourselves to games. And they could come down quite heavily on us for that. But actually, when it came to skill errors, rather than getting the hairdryer treatment and getting hammered by the coaches afterwards for making mistakes, actually, like, no, that's us. We've clearly not coached you well enough to be good at that, and so that's our responsibility to take away from you. And I think that was huge for me in terms of my learning. I think, as I say, I went through a long time at Sale. Not to say that it was negative, but I think sometimes we quite often focused on the things that we couldn't do, rather than actually going as coaches, taking that pressure away from us as players. And it really changed my mindset when I joined Saris. You could see that in the way the boys played. They played with a lot less fear. They played with a lot, just the real willingness to go out there and give it everything.
No, it's brilliant. I like that effort error versus skill error. I think that's very important. Sometimes we can see in teams the demise of a team is the lack of effort or lack of accountability. And recently we had one of your former teammates here, Brad Barrett, on the show as well. And he spoke about your guys' environment, and it's just the players' willingness to just be the best version of themselves every single day, but it's also linked to the environment that was created. I believe, by the players, by the staff, the coaches. And I want to touch base because you worked with Mark Bukul, and honestly, he's a great coach. He's a legend in his own way. He's great success at Saracens. Was probably one of the least spoken about coaches. If you look, we hear the Joe Smith effect, we hear about Rassie Rasmus, and all these great coaches. But I get the impression he's someone that is working in the shadows, doing his work. The team is the most important. But can you give us a bit more insights in terms of what it was like working with him?
At first, I would say he's a very unassuming guy. So I don't think he's not a Rassie type character where he courts that media. He's certainly somebody who likes to go under the radar. And like you say, I think his big focus is team first. What can I do that's going to ultimately help the team? I think my biggest thing actually was probably when I stopped playing. I spent a year doing some sort of scouting and recruitment for the club, and I sat in the coach's office when I was doing that role. And it was quite interesting just watching his interactions with the coaches and how he was. Like, he was really calm around the players and really chilled around the players, and was very particular about what he wanted. Would very rarely raise his voice. And I suppose he didn't really raise his voice to the coaches, but the pressure that those guys were under at times was like, oh. I mean, I felt for them because he was properly on them. He knew exactly what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted to get from them. And there were times I just sit back going, thank God that's not me. And I'm just kind of sitting, listening in the background. But he really, really clearly has this deep drive inside him that he wants to win, but just does it in a really nice, calm way. He's really steady in that sense. You don't see this kind of raised emotion one week and then a dip the next. It's just really quite nice and calm throughout the whole time. And that's what I think that enables the whole environment to stay calm throughout, as opposed to just these, some weeks it's up, some weeks it's down, depending on results, depending on this and that. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure in the coach's box for matches that he's all over the place. But it's the coaches that get it in the neck again rather than the players. So it's like, I think he certainly tempers how he is around the players, because he knows, of course, that emotion will get to players, I think, over time.
Today's Lessons from the Game episode was possible thanks to the support of Harris Begley Financial Planning, headed up by former Blackheath player Matt Begley. They are the experts to speak to for tailored advice on investments, mortgages, insurance, and pensions, helping you plan for a future of financial security. So when you think money, think Harris Begley, and head to www.harrisbegley.co.uk. Approver Quilter Financial Services Limited and Quilter Mortgage Planning Limited, March 2025.
Hi to everybody that is listening to the pod. We just like to officially welcome my co-host Ben Pegna into the episode.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Good to see you. Thanks, Charlie. You guys crack on. I'm not sure what I missed, so
All right.
please crack on. And
Don't worry. No, we're just talking about...
You didn't miss anything, mate. It's fine.
Nah, nothing crazy. We didn't get into yet how he manages the props on the field yet, so don't worry, didn't miss anything.
Okay, good.
It's great, talking about Mark, just his demeanor, way of things, and going about it. I think that's important. Leadership is it's key when it comes to a team, and especially a high performance team, and creating a great environment. But I would like to hear your version in terms of the Saracens' success. If I'm not mistaken, you won 2 premiership titles with them as well, and you won a European Cup, and you were instrumental in that as well. But what would you say really led to that? What was the recipe, if we can put it that way, that helped you guys to create that? Firstly, that DNA of the wolf pack, and just, I remember playing against Sarries when I was at Toulouse, man. It was tough, it was hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can maybe just give us some insights, that'd be awesome.
Well, first one is around the effort error, skill error. I think that was something that really shifted the dynamic in my mindset. I'd also say that there was this element of positivity that ran through the club all the time. And whether that comes from, of course, it comes from an element of performance and winning. I certainly get that. But even though, like, for example, we used to have, and they still will have, guests most weeks who come in on a Monday just to kind of see what happens, see how the coaches are, see what they do, see how the meetings run. But I could probably guarantee that if we had guests on the Monday, they probably wouldn't have known. If they didn't know what the result was from the previous Saturday, they probably wouldn't have known whether we wouldn't have lost. Because the tone of the meeting was the same every single time. It was, but I come from an environment where if you lose a game, you get absolutely hammered in the meeting on a Monday morning, the majority of the time. They're questioning why you did X, Y, and Z, and then you kind of go out and everybody's feeling a little bit deflated for training in the afternoon. Whereas this was different. It was just like, even though we'd lost a game, the tone was still the same, the energy was still the same, and they started to talk about the positive things that we did in those matches. And anything that needed attention was an individual basis, a one-to-one individual coach-player relationship, as opposed to a group thing. And so we'd leave that meeting feeling unbelievably energized. It was bizarre, and it took me a while to really kind of understand and get to grips with that, actually, because, as I say, I was so used to one way, and then I've come into another going, am I not expecting something else? Am I waiting for someone to jump out now and tell me that I like this is all one kind of big joke? But it was weird. And yeah, we went out into training in the afternoon, and like the buzz and the energy of training in the afternoon was just like through the roof. And that really kind of set a stall out for me in terms of and that's coming back to Mark and how to manage that emotion the whole time, making sure that those messages are on point, but also the emotion and the energy is fairly level. Another thing I'd probably say is that they never really spoke about winning either. Yeah, because of course everybody wants to win trophies. We're all in the same position. We're all in professional sport where we want to win, but they never really spoke about winning. I know there's so much talk out there about sort of process over outcome, but this was so true, and they lived by that. We often talked about making memories, both on the field and off the field. But those memories on the field came from the work that was done in training, the effort that was put into matches, the time that we spent together as players, off the field as well as on. And it was almost like we just kept, each week was like a new chapter of a book. We just kept rewriting it and rewriting it and rewriting it. And it was just very, very different to anything I'd really experienced. And I think the underlying message around this positivity thing was huge for me. I think the fact that you could go into training every day pretty much knowing what sort of environment you're walking into, rather than second guessing the whole time, was a massive, for me, what I believe is the biggest differentiator. We're all out there to do the same thing. Teams play very similar to each other. And so actually what's going to make the difference, and it's those sort of intangibles around positivity, around the relationships that you build with your mates, and how far are you willing to go on the field for those people that you're with.
That's brilliant. Just choking me up, they're taking me back to the Bulls days at Loftus. That's something that we experience, and I like that because Ben and myself, we are constantly talking about that. When things are going bad, you got to be capable of identifying those small wins. You're talking about that positive mindset, and it's not about being that out there American positive vibe. It's about genuine, authentic positivity, and identifying what your key work-ins are. And then I compared that to when I came to France, was completely different. Oh my goodness. You don't perform well, the coach doesn't greet you, or you get the soft handshake. We're always good at shake and pass. So that means he shakes your hand, but doesn't even look you in the eye, and he really pivots off towards the other side. And then you're like, okay, it's one of those. And then obviously we hear the stories of back in the day, what happened in Toulon. Now players get ripped into it. And, I've already shared loads of stories on this pod about my experiences in France. But Ben, it's great to finally have you back here, Ben. Let's jump in. And, I'm going to pass it over to Ben. I know he's got a load of questions because you touch base on topics. He's constantly sending me WhatsApps in the middle of the night about,
But on that one, actually, it just got me thinking about something that we have spoken about before, is that performance anxiety. And I suddenly thought back to environments I was in when I was playing, and I was sort of nervous for training. I was more nervous for training than I was for the match. and it was, I think, to do with the unexpected, to do with the peer pressure, to do with, I don't know, it sounds like, and I'm guessing from the environment that wasn't necessarily the case when you got to Saracens, Charlie. Was that quite different from Sale, would you say?
Yeah, I think don't get me wrong, Sale wasn't bad by all means. I think it was, certainly in the early days, I suppose I look at my career in kind of three parts. The first probably 6 or 7 years at Sale were awesome. The last probably 4 years were pretty tough, and those are those moments where you're constantly second guessing. You don't know the environment you're going to walk into. That's the performance anxiety. You don't know what the meeting is going to be like on the Monday. You don't know what the coach's response will be on the Monday or the Tuesday. And then, of course, then I flip it again and I joined Saris and I have 5 amazing years there. So, but that performance anxiety is real. Genuinely, it is. I think even my first ever England session. I mean, I think I turned up on the Sunday night. I said hello to a few senior players. Not one of them actually acknowledged that I was even there, which caused incredible anxiety. And the following day, I had an absolute shocker. So, it exists, doesn't it? It's there. It's like there's no reason why it should happen. Certainly in training, like you should be. The training is a place where you, in my opinion, it's the place to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Not to be crazy, of course, and to respect what you're doing, but at the same time, there has to be a platform for you to try and fail. Otherwise, you'll never get better.
Yeah, and you just mentioned before the skill error versus an effort error. Can you just quickly talk to us about that and that philosophy and methodology?
So one of our values is work rate. So whenever we had performances, they were always kind of reflect on the values that we had, and obviously work rate being one of them. Effort is clearly part of that, and it was something that we as players could control. We had absolute 100% control over whether we were going to commit ourselves to training and to matches, and would we give 100% effort every single time. And so, of course, when you're talking about the values that are kind of running through the club the whole time, if they ever wanted to question whether we, say if we'd lost, for example, we'd always come back to that. We'd look at our GPS stats. Did we work hard enough? What were our meters per second? All that sort of stuff. How much distance did we cover? And so if we were slightly off, that's when they can come down on us and say, you've not done this and you've not done that, because you all promised, right? And that's something that, as I say, we all have complete control over. The skill error thing is something that we don't necessarily always have control over, right? And players don't mean to make mistakes. Some of it comes down to pressure, of course. Some of it comes down to just lack of ability to do certain things, to offload in contact, for example. And so what they did was they said, well, look, actually, that's our responsibility as coaches to make you better at that. We know that you can't always control it. So what we'll do, we'll take that anxiety away from you, and it's up to us to make you better. And that's where that performance anxiety is removed. It's like you don't need to be anxious about working hard. That's an easy thing to do, isn't it? But yet, and the skill side was just something that, the coaches were hugely supportive of. They wanted us to try, but they also didn't mind us failing.
I can definitely resonate with that, because when I was coaching at La Rochelle, I always tell the players, in order for us to achieve performance, I'm responsible for 50% of that performance, and the player is responsible for 50% of it. Now, I have to explain, what is my 50%? I will be doing my due diligence, trying my best to identify our work-ons, what we need to be focused. You're talking there about the skill effort or the skill error, reducing that. That was my job, designing the training sessions, doing my analysis on the opposition, preparing the strategy, obviously with the leaders. And I told the players, your job, you just had to execute the training. When we would design a session, you just had to do it. Don't have to agree with it. You just got to pitch up and just give it your best. And I tell players, if you don't have that commitment, and this is why it's so great that you're sharing this, and Brad also spoke about it, that at the end of the day, you got to put in the work. Work ethic is something that's thrown around a lot, but we actually do pick up that a lot of players don't have it. They're not willing to. I just spoke yesterday to another coach here in France, and I'm telling listen, these guys have the skill set, but they're not putting in the effort. They're not putting in the hard work. So that's brilliant. But Charlie, I'm going to just we don't want to skip a few steps here, but we have to do it. We're a bit crunch for time because you're a busy man. We work with a lot of players. Ben and myself, we got our school communities, and recently a lot of players have been asking this question, like, how do I bounce back from a poor performance? And recently I spoke about a player that he had one poor scrum, and then that scrum got in his head. And then he had a poor scrum session, and then he got frustrated about the poor scrum session, and the rest of the set piece session or split session went haywire, and then he was out of it. When he came to the collective, he was nowhere, and eventually he played himself out of the team that week. And seeing that you are now in the domain where you're working on developing resilience, leadership, teamwork, and I think this is right in your wheelhouse. I think the big question we always ask on this pod is, and players ask us, how do you develop resilience as a player? What do you need to do? I get asked that a lot. I give my point of view, Ben gives his, but I would love to hear from your side. How can players develop resilience?
I mean, that's like I think people could debate this for a long time, couldn't they? I think resilience, actually is something that you develop through practice. I don't necessarily think it's something that you learn, like by reading text. I think by throwing yourself into uncomfortable situations and knowing and having the courage to throw yourself into uncomfortable situations to see how you respond and to see how you then move forward from that. That's kind of where you build resilience. There are ways that, and the little like tools and techniques that you can use in the moment, or even after training or before training, that you can do to help move forward quicker. But I think in terms of kind of building that long-term resilience, I think that just comes from, it certainly comes from trial and error. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you guys have different opinions to each other?
No, I think you're right, Charlie. I think it's getting outside your comfort zone, and obviously that's quite challenging, isn't it? And I was thinking, I think it's in your situation, you went from being at university in 1 minute, and then you're playing it in, you're contracted at Sale like very shortly afterwards, aren't you? And so suddenly it's a hockey stick, isn't it? It's like a very steep learning curve, and everything's new, and it's developing resilience, and it's developing. And I guess we just go through life, don't we? And like that, and developing moments where you're trying to, I'm a dad of 3, and you're trying to create opportunities where you're trying not to control it too much, but you're trying to give them opportunities to sort of push through and develop resilience and perseverance, and not and do stuff like that. I think probably G's probably pretty similar, aren't you, G?
Yeah, but just Ben, you just threw it out there, you're dad of 3. This guy's a dad of 5, so I think he's resilient.
I know, bro. That's why I just mentioned it in passing. Yeah, I didn't make a big deal of it. It was very quick, bro. Yeah,
it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I think we have similar point of views. My point of view in terms of how to develop resilience, it comes through experience. It comes from those setbacks, those losses, the trauma we experience. It goes back. I always use the example, and I became a Springbok in 2004 and 2005. I didn't even make the Bulls Super Rugby team. I was playing in the championship just below, and I had no choice. If I wanted to stay in the box setup, I had to keep on doing my best. I had to keep on pitching up for training. At the end of the day, for me, it's about staying in the fight and finding that inner strength to overcome those mental walls or those obstacles, whether mental, physical, or emotional. And you just got to stay in the fight. And sometimes you might not get it right, but just by linking up to what you said, putting in the effort to actually move forward one step at a time. And you guys mentioned as well, it's going into that fear zone. Talk about getting the comforts, going into the unknown, pushing yourself, trying to push your limits, whether it's in training, you are tired. So like, no, what? I'm just going to go a bit harder. We, back in the day with the Bulls, started with Victor Matfield and Farid Dupree, Charlie, is that when we were done with training, Victor would just look at the team. Are we tired? No, we're not. Let's do extra reps. And we just start running, and we just have the SNC coach like, guys, what are you doing? Just work hard within the session.
Yeah.
So I think it's not that easy.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, can I just add a little bit on that though? I think there's also an element of reflection and reframing those situations, isn't there? It's like there's one thing being courageous and putting yourself into uncomfortable situations, but actually the whole idea of learning from those is, okay, well, what happened? Like, was it genuinely as bad as you thought it was? Or can we look at the situation and look at it like in the cold light of day when you're not emotional about it? Let's reflect. Let's think about factually what actually happened, and can we reframe that into something that might be more positive?
Yeah.
So I think yes, we can throw ourselves in there, but actually, how do we learn from it? That's the biggest thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And just to bounce on that, a while back, a player that I'm mentoring in, he didn't have a great scrum in the game, and eventually just had a ripple effect, and eventually he got subbed, and then eventually came back on. So I said to him, well, what stood out for me was that when he came back onto the field was his body language. I could see he was ready. So when he came back on those next two scrum, first scrum was stable, and the second scrum, he destroyed his opponent. So that's a great example. It's like when you're making that shift, but also I think that is very important, reflection. How often do we take time to reflect? When we were older, we do it, but when I was younger, to be honest, I didn't always take that time. I was always in my own head, and just instead of just taking a step back in terms of what happened. And recently spoke to one of my former coaches, and he said to me, and I asked him about a certain game that I didn't play, and he said, Gene, all we can agree on, you were not the same player at the end of your career when we were in the beginning of your career. So like, okay, got it.
Charlie, something you mentioned there, G, you talked about getting in your own head. And I think when up with my coaching now, with the different coaching that I do at different levels, probably the stuff that I learned that I did wrong is probably shaped me more than the stuff I did well, and teaching people not to, I was just going to talk about your, Charlie, with setbacks and things like that you had with injuries and difficult moments. You had an 11-year international career, but you had a lot of setbacks and ups and downs and missed World Cup selections from injury and things like that. How has that shaped how you look at the game now and how you coach now? And is that instrumental? Do you think you learned more from those times than you would have if it had been all plain sailing, as we talk about resilience?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I also have a lot of perspective on those things. It's like there's also an element of, well, if it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't meant to be. I've certainly done a lot of reflection of certainly of my international career, and I'm well aware that it was always a bit of a roller coaster, and it was like some days it was really good, and some days it was really, really bad. And then, as I said, in terms of that reflection piece, it's actually going, well, why was it bad? What was I responsible for? What was the environment responsible for? And there were certain things like that I know I could have done differently, and I could have adapted better and done something differently. But I also know that the environment could have been different as well. For example, I played in sort of many games where the scrum half was different and the centre partnership was different. So how do you build any sort of continuity in an international team where you've only got a short window of actually getting that right? So I kind of look back with some perspective, and I think that's only come about because I've unpicked those difficult moments as opposed to focusing on the things that went well. It's human nature, isn't it? We always focus on the things that we don't do very well as opposed to the things that we do. And I'm perhaps one of the worst people for that. But I think what it did do is just allowed me to step back and, as I say, look at my international career in a different light, and just really not take it apart by any means, but just take lots of things from it. Culturally one, individually second.
Charlie, so while we're mentioning and Ben mentioned some setbacks you faced and injuries, there any key moments, like maybe 2 or 3 moments that really stood out where it was really tough for you in your career? And we're on this topic of resilience, and we're talking about learning from, reflecting from it. So you can maybe share what are those moments where it was extremely hard for you, and now taking a step back when you're older, reflecting on what are the lessons that you've learned from it?
Without going into too much detail, I think I went through talking internationally. I played a game, was pulled off the field quite soon into the game, and the messages that I was given by the coaches completely contradicted themselves within the space of about 3 weeks. 1 minute I was told that I was wanted, and a few weeks later I was told that I didn't deserve to play for England ever again. And so that element of trust was completely destroyed between me and the coach. But yet that relationship somehow had to carry on if I wanted to get back into the England squad again. So that was a huge turning point for me in terms of how hard it is to build trust with people, but how easy it is to destroy it in an instant. And I think that now I kind of take that in terms of my own coaching journey and what I do with kids, and also with seniors, the adults that I coach as well. I know how hard it is to get the best out of them, for them to believe me, and for them to trust me in what I'm saying. But I'm also very aware that I could say something that could really like knock the wheels off straight away. So I'm much more thoughtful. I'm quite a thoughtful person anyway, but I'm very reflective and very thoughtful in how I approach those sorts of conversations and the way I coach people, because I'm aware that it can really impact a relationship instantly. And that's a huge learning for me.
That's fascinating. Charlie, did you take the responsibility to rebuild the trust or rebuild that relationship with that coach, or did they, how did you go about doing that?
I just chose not to, if I'm honest. I chose not to. I felt like my fingers had been burnt that badly. I chose not to. So it very much became a working relationship. But yet when things were said to me like, "Oh no, I trust you, I'm really pleased you're back in," I'm like, I'm not sure I get that now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
once bitten.
Yeah, completely. But it was a huge learning for me, and would I approach it differently? I'm not sure. Do you want to build that trust with somebody again? Do you want to build that relationship with somebody again? I don't know how that works. I'm quite stubborn as well. Does it work?
Yeah.
So Charlie, this is what I've been trying to get onto this question for a while now. So, if you can just tell us more, like I read up, you got Charlie Hodgson Performance. If you can tell us what that is all about, because you just mentioned now that you are coaching kids and you're coaching adults as well. If you can explain to us a bit more in terms of what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so it's actually Rugby Body. Charlie Hodgson Performance was, and then it all folded through COVID, and it's now into something called Rugby Body, which is a coaching and mentoring community for young aspiring rugby players who, from like 13 to 18, the sweet spot at the moment is probably 13 to 16. There's a lot of pressure that these kids are experiencing nowadays, and so from my experience of seeing it as a parent, my son was going through the Saracens Academy pathway, seeing the knock-on effect on him and the pressure that he puts on himself, that his mates put on themselves, being discarded from a pathway, dealing with injuries, games being streamed on Next Gen, all of these things that are now adding up. And whilst the academy pathways start later, under 15, it feels like from a younger age, people are thinking, how do I get ahead? So I'm going to be selected at 15 years old, or 14 or 15. And so I can really see that there's this added pressure that these kids are placing on themselves. And so, given my experience from professional sport, even as a youngster, I was always told I was too small. So there's lots of those conversations I have with kids at the moment around the similar things. Seeing my son's journey, it felt right to reconnect with rugby and come back into rugby and go, how can I help this next generation? What is it that I can do? What do they really need support with? And I think there's so much emphasis out there on physical development. There's so much emphasis out there on skill development, but there's very little in terms of mindset and mental skills. Certainly within, yes, I appreciate there's lots of sports psychologists and they kind of work across all sport, but rugby is what I know, and the experiences that I have within rugby, I really believe that I can help shape and support this next generation. I don't for 1 minute think that everybody I work with is going to become a professional rugby player. But what I want to do is ultimately give them the life skills and the tools and the techniques so that they can manage setbacks, so they can move forward from those mistakes, so they don't take mistakes as serious as they think they are, so they can manage comparison, all of those things like that undoubtedly come up in a teenager's head at those moments in time when I'm thinking, well, I just need to be able to look after them. And I think that's where I like to think that my experience will help them.
So Charlie, just you spoke about giving them the tools and the life skills at that age, and this is a very, very, how can I say, tough age, because we see things are different, and I always tell dads that are trying to push certain way of doing things on the kids the way they were taught. It doesn't work today. It's not the same. I think one of the greatest advice, or the best advice I got from my dad when I'm asking him how to parent my kids, is like, they're not the same. it's changed. It's a different ball game. I'm lost, to be honest with you. It's different. You got social media, you got technology, all these things. But when you have let's maybe put it this way. If you got a youngster, say the age of 14, 15, really struggling to bounce back from a poor game, because unfortunately today, we've seen it even at an academy level, a player will have a bad scrum. That same video will go viral on TikTok and get 2 to 3 million views. So all of a sudden, even they're not playing at a professional level, they're getting exposed massively, and that pressure and that anxiety. So, if you can maybe just share, give us a bit of insights, what tools are you sharing with them without giving away too much? I know it's your IP as well, but I think it could be really valuable for parents that are listening and youngsters as well. I know this is in the wheelhouse of Ben as well, so he's got a few follow-ups after this.
Yeah, this is not revolutionary by any stage. It's things that I learned as a player, and things that I just want to be able to pass on. And of course, within psychology, it's commonplace really. But I mentioned it before around reframing. That one scrum that you were talking about there for that youngster, that doesn't make him a bad scrummager. And like I say, if he's gone off and come back on the field, his body language changed. So the social media side, in terms of fact and fiction, I think what they see in a 5-second highlight reel is there's no context behind it. So if you actually watch the full game, that person showing their highlights might actually have had a fairly average game, but they've done 2 things that are amazing, and next thing you know, they're getting 20,000 views on it. I mean, so for me, it's encouraging them to really see through what is genuine and what's not. There's a reframing side, and also and then even Dan Carter spoken about it, and there are lots of players that speak about these old grounding techniques. It's how do you reset in the moment, take a deep breath, do something, change your perspective on what you're doing to be able to move forward. And as I said, they're not revolutionary by any means. It's just it's making them aware that there are things out there that they can do, and physiologically, psychologically, they will help. But it's actually through conversation that you get them to realize that what they're thinking and what they're telling themselves is actually wrong, and in the easiest way of saying it. And it's not me telling them that they're wrong. It's asking the questions so they uncover that themselves. Which I had only last weekend with a conversation with one of the boys in my group. So it's when you feel like they have those light bulb moments, when they feel like they're like, I get it. I don't need to look at it this way. That's kind of the power in the conversations, those coaching conversations, which you guys will undoubtedly have as well.
It's really insightful, Charlie. Yeah, I do. And it's one of the things that's a knife edge, I find. All the things you've mentioned, and the comparison is a big one, I find, that really derails all of us, I guess, but especially when you were young, I definitely fell victim to that. But is this knife edge of, I see it with, and I think it's understandable. People want to be the best version of themselves, and they take it really seriously. But then how do you take it really seriously and not lose perspective, and it will become all consuming? And, so that you're not thinking about, if you got an evening kickoff or something like that, and it's just, chewing you up inside all day, and you're not able to do anything else apart from that. And I think that's one of the ones that I'm seeing quite often at the moment.
Yeah, it is hard to be able to take your attention away, isn't it? And I think even if I kind of bring it back to the Saracens stuff that we did, they always used to speak to us about the busiest players make the best players. And so actually, what else are you doing away from the rugby field that's actually going to contribute to performance on the field? I like to talk a lot to the kids now, not necessarily about what's your plan A and what's your plan B. What's your plan A and what's your plan A? You need to have 2 plan A's in place, and how do you manage them both? Like if your plan A is to become a rugby player, great, but what's your other plan A? You might not become a rugby player, so therefore, what does that look like? But you spend the same amount of energy and the same amount of time on both, because they're both as important as each other, as opposed to one being more important than the other.
That's good. Charlie, I would love to. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, you got picked at centre at one stage for England, and you'd never played centre before. I'd love to get in. I mean, yeah, but there's loads of you could talk about that, and we could ask you loads of questions about that. But I'm just trying to think from a performance mindset, or the mindset of how did you deal with that? What was that? Do you thinking what, or did you just say, okay, I'm reframing this. This is the opportunity now. I've got good people either side of me. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I had a phone call from Clive Woodward on the Sunday as I was driving down to the hotel, and he went, I wasn't really expecting to start that Six Nations at all. Actually, it's 2003. But Mike Tyndall had an injury at the start of the tournament, so he was looking at different ways of managing what the backline looked like. He was also reflecting on what happened the previous year against France when Johnny Wilkinson was absolutely battered by Serge Betson. And he wanted to have a left foot and right foot kicking option. And so just went with this sort of crazy idea that that he'd like to play me at 12 and Johnny at 10, and the two of us become two playmakers, two kicking options. And of course, in theory, I'm like, yeah, great. That's a great idea, Clive. But like at the same time, inside of me, I'm going, oh my God, like this could be, this is going to be interesting. And I suppose at that stage, you're young, you don't really question. I'm like, yeah, great. I'm doing it. But then as things start to unfold, you go, I feel so out of place here. And that's only on reflection now. Like I look back at it and think, should I have said yes? Should I have almost, like, I hate this saying, but like put your foot on the ball and go, just stop for a second. That is what you're suggesting, like, really the right thing to do. And he clearly had trust in me, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. We beat France at Twickenham, we beat Wales in Wales, and then Mike came back for the third game against Italy. I came off the bench then and did my ACL, and that was it. Sort of rest is history, that tournament. So really strange time, if I'm being honest. I certainly wasn't well, ready's the wrong word, but I certainly didn't really know what I was doing. I just worked incredibly hard that week in terms of preparation to make sure that I knew exactly what I needed to do.
And I mean, it's this, you talked about getting injured then. Did you think that's my World Cup gone at that stage? Were you even thinking that far ahead, or were you thinking, oh, there's another World Cup on the horizon, I might get a shot then? What was your mindset then?
Yeah, no, I didn't really think that far ahead. I always, if I'm being honest, I never really thought of myself as being like, I'm a definite part of this squad. And I, like, Johnny was the main starter, and quite rightly so. I obviously wanted to challenge him in every way I could possible with my performances for Sale. But there was no part of me that thought you're guaranteed of going. And so actually when I got injured, I was like, okay, I'll just deal with it and I'll work forward and I'll see how long it takes me in terms of the rehab. England were great in supporting me. I went off to America for 4 weeks with Austin Healy. The two of us were sent out to train together with a knee rehab specialist, which was really, really good. Just didn't have time to recover and do everything I needed to do to even be in with a shot of selection. There is a part of me that, of course, is disappointed that I missed out on that. But at the same time, it's not, as I say, it's not like I felt like I was really a major part of that team. Like I'd obviously started games, I'd been involved in games, but I didn't really feel like you're a dead cert, you're definitely going, and now you got that you're going to miss it. You miss it. So I was quite matter of fact about the whole thing. I think even I think the harder one actually was the 4 years later. I did my ACL against South Africa in November of 2006. And I missed basically the whole season then, the rest of the season, and then did all the sort of the World Cup warm-up bits and then didn't get selected. But I got things that irritate me there. I got married 23rd of June, and then the day after I had to go away to an England Marine camp. I mean, and the Marines are like, yeah, you're not going to need your phones where you're going, so hand your phones in here. And I'm like, hold on a second, mate, I got married yesterday. You want me to tell you? You want to say I can't speak to my wife? And all these things were just sort of unfolding. I'm like, I've given everything I can to get into this position, and yet I still haven't been selected. And that probably grates more on me, the fact that I'd committed much more to that campaign than I ever could have done the other one, if that makes sense.
Charlie, you touched base there that you didn't feel much a part of it, and I think if you look back at your career as well, and if you look at the Premiership, I'm not mistaken, you still hold the record for the most points scored in the Premiership. Is that
That's
correct?
Right, Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
So that didn't happen by chance or anything like that. But what I would like to know is your mindset. You know you're competing against Johnny Wilkinson. And back in my day, my competition was against Osterrand. And when I thought it was going to be my time, then Tandai Matuarira comes up onto the scene, and amazing player and a legend in its own. And I needed to think differently, especially when it came to Beast. You know, if I wanted to earn back my spot, how I went about it. I was very meticulous about that. But I would like to know, how did you approach that? Okay, you're competing as a Johnny, and you in your own right, you were a great player. How did you approach that? Like, did you have a specific strategy in terms of like, listen, if I want to get into contention with the England team, obviously you just mentioned you need to play well for your team, which was Sale at the time. But was there anything in particular? Because I think it's very important, because a lot of players that I'm speaking with at the moment and working with that, other than their club, they are number 2, the number 3, they have the qualities or the skill set to become number 1. They don't know how to approach it. And when they don't get the opportunity, like the starter goes, they just kind of like, oh, but I'm not a favorite, it's favoritism and all those stuff. And I tell them, no, you need to analyze the whole situation. Why is that guy starting? What are you bringing to the table, and what can you do differently? But what was your mindset back then, and what advice would you give to a younger player in terms of how to approach that competition?
Well, I think the first thing to say that I did spend a lot of time overanalyzing what Johnny did and therefore trying to emulate what he was doing. But then actually there came a point where I was like, I'm not going to defend like him, right? He was a freak of a defender. There are very few fly halves that will defend like that. But yet, so then I had to go, well, what can I make? What part of my game can I make better than Johnny's that could actually knock him out of the team because of this? Like at that stage, of course, the game was very, and let's be honest, defense does win you championships, right? So I'm not going to get away from that. But what I then started to focus on was, all right, if I can't be as good as him at that, what can I be unbelievably good at that's going to be better than him? So then my thinking around the sort of kicking game around the field, around my handling and my ability to put people into space and my attacking threat and all those things, that was like, right, that's what I'm going to go after. That's going to be my point of difference. I was still going to concentrate on goal kicking, and I still want to make that good. Whether it's at the same heights as Johnny, I don't know. But for me, it was very much around consistency, and as I say, the stats don't lie now in terms of Premiership points. So it was the mindset really was to take my strength and turn it into a super strength. I think we can get bogged down by what other people are doing and try to keep up with what they're doing, as opposed to really focusing on what we're good at. And that was my mindset, and that's what I'd say to lots of young players coming through is don't just bring yourself up to somebody else's level because that's a weakness and you're going to bring them up to here. Actually take your strength and turn it into a super strength. Like, what is it that you're genuinely going to become like world class at? And that's what will make a difference. If that environment is not suited for you in that, then fine. You might have to go and look for somewhere else. At the end of the day, environments don't suit everybody. Certain coaches don't suit certain players. That's just a fact of life. But I think if you to get the most out of yourself, don't just focus on the things that you can't do, but really, really go after something that you can.
I was wondering, that transformation or that mindset shift that you had there, are there any moments that you really clearly regret that you would do differently when you look back? Or did you process things like you just explained and then eventually get to the stage of thinking, okay, how can I make the best of this situation?
I mean, if I'm honest, I probably should have spent a lot more time, like probably around the defensive side early on in my career. But it was weird because then, and I know I probably should I should have spent more time on that, definitely. But then, interestingly, when I joined Saris, Paul Gustard was going, "No, we've got 100% trust in you. Don't worry about it." And it was like, that was a bit of a shock for me because I was going, all right, so I've been told for the last 10 years I'm really shit at this, and now actually I'm all right. That was like that was a really strange thing for me to cope with. Yeah, I mean, listen, I know for definite I could have done more, and I think that's, whether it's regret or not, I think, but I know that's something I could have done differently.
Right, Charlie. I know we need to have a hard stop in a few minutes' time, so I just want to. We've spoken about a lot of deep stuff, but I want us to celebrate those great moments. If you have to look back, you spoke about reflection. What are the key moments that really stood out? That just puts a smile on your face. Whether it was lifting a trophy or just a crazy time in a locker room. Is there any key moments that stand out in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think you speak to any player, some of the best moments are in the changing rooms after games, and that's even if you've lost. It's that shared moment, isn't it, where you come off the field, you all know you've worked hard for each other, and it's just you. There's no external, there's nothing coming in from the outside. It's just you guys together, and it's either celebrating or kind of sitting in those moments. So. They're really, really important to me, and that's kind of the biggest thing that I think that I miss most about not playing is those shared moments that you get in the changing room. Then, of course, I can't take away the fact that winning trophies is just incredible, isn't it? And winning my first premiership with Sale was special. We'd gone from being, certainly starting as an academy player, a core group of academy players with some sprinkling of internationals in it as well. We went on to win the Premiership in 2006. Was just an amazing journey that we went on for 6 years. And then finally, I suppose the last 2 weeks of my career, I know I sat on the bench for both of them, but I'm still going to take it. We won the European Cup, and then 2 weeks later we won the Premiership, and then I kind of stepped away from the game. So. Those are the bits to where I always thought they were reserved for certain people, and that's it. To walk away from the game in that way was just, yeah. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything else, to be honest.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. Benny, any last questions from your side?
Yeah, you know what? I think I know. Well, I've got an answer for this, that I imagine Charlie will say. But I would love to know, Charlie, what's the best rugby performance from an individual that you've ever been a witness to, or that is there something that stands out for you, and maybe in your position as well? Is there something that you think, wow, that was the benchmark?
The obvious one is Dan Carter. I think in the Lions series in 2005 when I was in New Zealand, that was just something for a guy who looked like he just had so much time on the ball. He looked like everything was just going in slow motion, and he was making the game look far easier than everybody else. And I think he did that more often than not. Actually, not just in that Lions series, but he made it look like the game was easy. But if I'm honest, he's one in my position. Jason Robinson was an absolutely incredible player to play with. Not just because of his ability to beat defenders easily. I think it was the fact that he managed to transition from being at the height of rugby league and then came across and did exactly the same in rugby union. And very few cases of those have really happened, if I'm honest. You've got, who do you really put in the same bracket? Wendell Sailor, Lotta Takiri in Australia, Jason Robinson here in the UK. I don't really think anybody else has really smashed it like he has. There's been a few, don't get me wrong, who've come across and done well, but I think not in the same light as Jason.
That's probably quite a good note to end on, isn't it, Jason, talking about Jason Robinson. Charlie, thanks for your time today. It's been great to see you and just hear some of the insights. It's been brilliant.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed this pod. And, Charlie, keep on doing the work that you're doing. It's very instrumental what you're doing right now with the younger generation. They need it more than ever. And is there any way the youngsters can reach out to you if they want to work with you?
So my email address is charlie@rugby-buddy.com. I'm on Instagram, rugby.buddy. And my website is rugby-buddy.com. So please reach out. If anybody's got any questions, love to hear from you.
Oh, awesome. We'll definitely add that to the show notes. Charlie, thanks for taking your time. Ben, I'm finally glad that you could join us today. It was unbelievable, man.
Cheers, mate. Thank you, man. Cheers, Charlie.
Guys.
Really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks
you
so much, guys.
All right, Ben. Wow, what episode. We spoke about it beforehand, and we knew, Charlie Hodgson's a legend in his own right, and he played in the shadow of Johnny Wilkinson, but what he shared there was gold. It was brilliant. And I think I really enjoyed this pod because it's always tough when you have these former players, Ben, that have these great careers, but then the work that they're doing after their careers, their mindset, their philosophy. That really intrigued me. So I would like to get your feedback, what you thought of the episode.
Same, G, and I hope it comes across to the listeners. Charlie's one of those players where the reflection that he did during his career, but also post-career, has been integral to his success. And you could hear some of that, I think, in the conversation today. How he reflected and being picked in the same squad as Johnny Wilkinson, not getting injured with 2 knee injuries just before 2 World Cups. How he's bounced back from that, the resilience, how he then uses that in his coaching today, mentally resetting and reframing, and how he coaches using those tools and techniques today. Some real insight there. Really, really good.
No, it's brilliant. What I really enjoyed, I think the one thing that stands out was the effort era versus skill era, that mindset or that philosophy they had at Saracens. And I think it's so crucial that players know that if you just put in the actual work, if you're not being lazy, if you're not just doing what is enough, but going above and beyond, and if your efforts are right up there, it's 100%, the skill level, that will come, like you just mentioned, sometimes you don't make mistakes on purpose. But if it comes down to due to lack of effort, and that's really something where you need to look at. But the other thing which stood out for me is like taking a time just to reflect. And we often have these discussions in our school communities, Ben, where we are telling players, just take a minute. What just happened if you made a mistake, or if you did something, it was a massive error and it cost your team. Instead of like feeling sorry for yourself and blaming yourself, I cost the game, like what just happened, Just give yourself a minute. And in my community, I mentioned, but just like adapt that next job mindset. Just focus on the next task at hand, because often players, they get in their own heads, and that's what we're also trying to do through this podcast, sharing our knowledge and our experience, and also the little weekly videos that we are sharing in our communities as well. We're doing our best to kind of like guide them on the right path and give them the tools.
Yeah, and 100% G. And I think Charlie also mentioned that rugby, especially over the last 25 years, definitely 30 years, has been about S&C, it's been about some analysis, it's been about defense. And when you meet young players, often it's about what they're doing in the gym, it's about what they can lift, how, and that mindset, and how you reframe, and how you use tools like visualization, and how you can be consistent in how you apply yourself, and how do you behave in the environment, and how do you communicate with your teammates, your coaches, what's your mental approach when you do make a mistake, or when one of your teammates makes a mistake, all of those things. It was really good to hear Charlie, and encouraging to hear him talk about that and how he's helping young players now, because that's such a big area that I think has been neglected and is sort of not given enough attention.
No, it's brilliant. Man, there's so much. Another thing that comes to mind, I love when he mentioned, often when we talk to rugby players, and what is shared is the reality. Not everybody is going to become a professional rugby player. Even the players that I'm mentoring, Ben, I tell them, listen here, I'm helping you. You're going to level up as a rugby player. You're going to level up as a scrummager. But there's still no guarantee that you'll become a professional rugby player. Sometimes you just need luck. You need the work ethic. You need the skill set. You need to have that effort, which is very important. But I really enjoyed what he shared. Is often we tell, and I made mistakes when I work with players, Ben, telling you need to have a plan B. And what he said, you need to have a plan A and a plan A. And that is so important because it's not about sharing your attention or splitting up your attention. I don't believe that old phrase we say, jack of all trades, master of none, comes into play. It's just about being realistic, knowing that potentially you might not become a rugby player. So what are the skill sets what's my other dreams outside of rugby? And this is something which I'm living at the moment. I still have that ambition to be a full-time rugby coach, to coach a pack of forwards, to coach a team. When that opportunity presents itself, I will take it with both hands. I'm really looking forward to that. But then also I've got my other plan A, which is what we're doing then. It's our podcast, and it's our school community. It's helping players and mentoring players, guiding them on their journey. And I think it's important for our listeners to adapt that mindset. The same effort that you're putting into your rugby, willing to go above and beyond, you also need to take time and think, what's my other plan A? Because when rugby doesn't work out, before you wipe out your eyes, it's 20, 23, 24, or sometimes you're 25, 26. You have an end of career injury, you might have gone pro. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And oh man, I really enjoyed that. But it's a real pity, Ben, that we couldn't go on longer. I felt there was so much to go into. But, this is the thing about the guests in our podcast, they're busy schedules, and we're just grateful that they're actually taking the time and sharing their authentic selves with us.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe we can get them back on. I'd love to hear more about a few of those things. The point you mentioned then about having a plan A and a plan A, I think also it just relieves the pressure. I often say it to young players, if you do something else, it's just like at the moment, it's the only thing, it's the biggest thing for you. So you just overthink it. So if you have that evening kickoff, which I alluded to just now in the podcast, then the whole day I see players getting worked up, and then they get overhyped, they overthink, they don't perform well. Whereas when you are busy and you're doing other things and you have perspective and your family's first and all these other things, it's amazing how that releases you to perform better, because you are much more relaxed in the environment. You're relaxed. You just treat people normally. I used the example recently. It's just imagine, like you're at work all day and you're playing a five-a-side game of football in the evening, with your mates after work. It would be the same. You need to almost take it very, very seriously, and have done everything you can, your nutrition, etc. But don't overthink it, and then you'll be relaxed and you'll probably perform better because you won't be in this anxious state and over heightened.
No, there's so much. And one of the topics, Ben, that came up, and this is maybe language we haven't spoken about before and words we haven't used, but we have in fact been talking about it, but it's that performance anxiety. And, that's building up to one of our master classes, which we are currently working on, like why what you're implementing or training doesn't transfer to the game. Players can be a master of a skill, but then he has so much performance anxiety. And I know normally performance, a lot of people label to other stuff, but we're going to keep it PG there. But the most important thing is, Ben, is understanding. Why do you have that anxiety when it comes to your performance in the game? Why is the skills that you are working on during the week not transferring onto the weekend, and why you're not executing it with confidence and precision? So I'm really looking forward to that masterclass, Ben. We still got loads of work to do. Hopefully that we'll get that sorted and launching in the next 2 weeks.
It's a fascinating topic, G, isn't it? Because I often, I reflect back on some of the environments I've been in when I was playing and coaching, and I'm sure lots of people do, that you go in as a youngster, and I didn't. The first environment I went into as a player, professional environment, I didn't speak to anybody for about 6 months. The older players, the senior players, you just keep your head down. You get on the bus. You hope not to be singled out. You keep your head down, and you're maybe fearful of making mistakes, and you play within yourself. And it's amazing how just a couple of people taking an interest in you and opening the conversation with you and doing things like that can put you at ease and reduces that anxiety. And it's more prevalent now and common now for people to be aware of that and do that and make it easier for you to come in and hit the ground running. But it's something that's really, I think, important for players to all levels to understand and be aware of, and also coaches.
All right, Ben. It was a brilliant episode. And before we sign off, we'd just like to ask our audience, everybody's been following us and leaving us comments on our social media platforms, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Instagram, to say thank you for all your support. Without you, it would not have been possible to continue this journey on the podcast. But we need you to help you to continue to grow the show. So please like, follow, and subscribe. It's very important. But most importantly, Ben and I, we both have school communities. It's unbelievable. It's growing week by week, and we're having great discussions in our communities. So please make sure that you reach out to us. Just DM us with the words community on our respective Instagram pages, and we'll send you the link. All right, Ben. So thanks for joining. It was unbelievable. Even though we had technical errors, that happens, part of the game. Your technical awareness and ability to pivot paid off. So thanks for that. And really looking forward to our next pod. See you soon, brother.
Cheers, G. Thanks, mate. Have a great day.